The Dominion was a marvel of engineering, its sleek form cutting through the void of space with a quiet grace that belied its size. Towering spires of glass and chrome gleamed under the soft glow of distant stars, and its halls echoed with the footsteps of diplomats, officers, and ambassadors from across the galaxy. A ship meant to carry the hopes of peace between the stars, yet on its deck, tensions brewed, and one passenger in particular felt the weight of every whispered rumor and sideways glance. Major Finn Donovan stood in front of the observation window, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond. The ship's hum vibrated through the floor beneath him, a constant reminder that he was on a mission far more important than anything he had ever faced before. His days as a Special Forces operative were behind him. His reputation as a Deathworlder was something he could not escape, even here, surrounded by representatives of alien species who looked at him with equal parts fear and disdain. Deathworlder. The term felt like a weight, a label that defined him more than he ever wanted. It was true, his homeworld, Earth, was a place of constant survival, where every creature, human or otherwise, had to fight for its place. But he was here, aboard this vessel, with one goal in mind: to prove humanity had more to offer the galaxy than just its ability to endure violence. The door behind him slid open with a soft whoosh. Finn didn't turn around, he didn't need to. He knew who it was. "Major Donovan," a voice said, cool and formal. "The Chancellor requests your presence." Finn turned then, his sharp gaze meeting the eyes of the Zarnu envoy Virex. Tall, with skin like polished silver, Virex carried the typical air of superiority common among the more advanced species aboard the Dominion. He was part of the Zarnu diplomatic delegation, an alien race whose civilization had existed for millennia, far older and, in their view, far wiser than humanity. Virex's cold eyes lingered on Finn for a moment longer than necessary, a silent reminder of the growing distrust among the delegates. "Tell the Chancellor I'm on my way," Finn replied, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it, a tension that had been building ever since he stepped onto this ship. He was always being watched, analyzed. In the back of his mind, he could almost hear the whispers of the aliens who feared him, the Deathworlder on board. Virex nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned, leaving the door to slide shut behind him. Finn straightened, adjusting the collar of his military jacket. He was no diplomat, and he wasn't used to all the political maneuvering. He had been thrust into this role after his time in the military, a last-ditch attempt to have someone with experience on the diplomatic front lines. He knew what this was, an experiment. A test to see if humanity could truly take its place in galactic politics, or if it was just another war-hungry species that couldn't be trusted. With a deep breath, Finn made his way down the corridor, past the diplomats and their aides, who gave him wide, wary glances as he passed. He couldn't blame them. A Deathworlder in their midst, a soldier trained in the harshest conditions imaginable, was nothing to be comfortable with. His presence alone was a reminder of the violence humanity had endured and, some feared, might unleash again. He reached the chamber where the peace talks were being held, a large, circular room with a ceiling that stretched impossibly high. Around the table sat leaders from different worlds, some humanoid, others far less familiar. A few greeted him with polite nods, while others simply stared past him, as if he were a shadow they wished would disappear. But the true focus of the room was on one being, Chancellor Pithra, the leader of the Galactic Council. Pithra was seated at the head of the table, his long, translucent limbs extending gracefully over the table. His insect-like features made him appear both regal and alien, his compound eyes blinking in a slow rhythm. He was one of the most influential beings in the galaxy and, for the most part, had been humanity's biggest ally in these talks. But Finn knew that Pithra's feelings toward humans, especially the human military, were far from warm. "Ah, Major Donovan," Pithra's voice rang out, smooth and cold. "I trust you've been settling in comfortably aboard our humble vessel?" Finn offered a tight smile. "It's been a unique experience, Chancellor." The other delegates shifted in their seats, sensing the tension between the two of them. Pithra continued, "I trust that you understand the gravity of the discussions we are about to engage in." The peace of this galaxy is at stake, Major. One wrong move, one spark of aggression, and we will have chaos. Your reputation precedes you. Some of our colleagues are concerned about your presence here. They fear that your kind's volatile nature may jeopardize the delicate balance we are trying to establish. Finn didn't flinch. He had heard these concerns a dozen times already, from various alien delegates. He had expected it. It wasn't the first time his kind had been underestimated or feared. I'm here for peace, Chancellor, Finn replied firmly. I didn't survive the wars to bring more violence to this galaxy. I'm here to make sure humanity is seen for what it truly is, not just survivors, but partners. A low murmur spread through the room. Pithra's antennae twitched as he leaned forward. Partners, you say? Yet many of the species here doubt that humanity can be trusted. They whisper about your people's tendency to escalate matters, to view conflicts as opportunities for dominance, not diplomacy. Finn met Pithra's gaze squarely. I've fought in wars, yes. But not because I wanted to. Because I had no choice. And I've seen what humanity can do when we fight together. We survive. And we build something stronger afterward. We're not just a weapon, Chancellor. We're a people. There was a long silence. Pithra seemed to consider Finn's words carefully, his many eyes narrowing. The room fell quiet, each delegate weighing the human's boldness. After what felt like an eternity, Pithra spoke again. Then let us see, Major Donovan, if your people can prove themselves worthy of the galaxy's trust. With that, the meeting began, but Finn knew it was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more whispers, more distrust. And as he sat down at the table, he couldn't help but wonder, would this ship, the Dominion, be the start of a new era for humanity? Or would it be the ship that sank under the weight of the galaxy's fears? The journey had only just begun. The days stretched long as Finn walked the corridors of the Dominion, a ship that, despite its gleaming exterior, felt claustrophobic in its own way. The silence of space outside contrasted with the quiet buzz of conversations happening within the halls. Diplomats, aides, and alien representatives moved about, their business as important as it was mundane. But Finn's presence here, like a ghost, haunted every room he entered. Whispers followed him. Sometimes they were subtle, eyes that shifted away too quickly, the murmurs of hushed voices when he passed. At other times they were louder, an occasional raised eyebrow or a sideward glance. They couldn't help it. The reputation of a Deathworlder was something that no amount of diplomacy could erase. It had been nearly 20 years since Finn had left the front lines of human military service, but the scars remained, on his body and in his mind. He remembered the blood-streaked days of war, the endless firefights, the burning ruins of cities long forgotten by anyone but their survivors. He had been part of the campaigns to defend humanity's fledgling colonies, the battles to stave off alien invaders, and the wars that had shaped the new age of galactic exploration. But it wasn't the wars that defined him now. It was the whispers, the looks, and the ever-present label that clung to his name like an unwanted shadow, Deathworlder. He walked past a group of alien delegates, their alien eyes following him, their conversation halting abruptly as he drew near. Finn did not flinch. He had learned to ignore the stares, even as they sent silent messages of distrust and unease. His communicator buzzed. It was a simple message, brief and to the point. Meeting in 30 minutes. Chancellor Pithra requests your presence. Finn paused, his eyes drifting to the window as he took in the stars beyond. It was a beautiful sight, almost enough to make him forget the tension in the air. Almost. With a deep breath, he headed toward the meeting room. Inside the chamber, Chancellor Pithra awaited him, perched like a poised figurehead at the head of the sleek, metallic table. His many eyes flicked over Finn, calculating, dissecting every movement. Finn entered without ceremony, walking briskly to his seat. The other alien representatives, their skin tones ranging from the cerulean blue of the Saltrians to the burnished gold of the Kali, watched him carefully. The room was tense, too tense. Finn felt the weight of every set of eyes on him. They were looking for a reaction, any sign that he would lash out. Pithra, as always, remained calm. Major Donovan, he began, his voice smooth, almost predatory. I trust you are well after the last discussion? Finn nodded, keeping his expression neutral. I'm well, Chancellor. Ready to proceed. Good, Pithra said. We have important matters to discuss. There are those in the galaxy who question humanity's place among the stars. They believe your people are nothing more than soldiers. Violence, after all, seems to be your answer to everything. Finn's fingers curled into a fist on the table, but he forced his posture to remain composed. We fight because we have to. Not because we want to. Of course, Pithra said, almost patronizingly. But as much as your species prides itself on its survival instincts, there are those who fear that your methods may someday disrupt the delicate peace we've worked so hard to establish. People like you, Major, they see you as a remnant of Earth's primitive past. Finn's mind raced. He had heard it all before. Humanity's violence, humanity's past, humanity's primitive ways. It was as if none of them could see the truth, that humanity, despite its chaotic history, had learned from its mistakes. Every battle, every war, every bloodshed, those were the things that had forced humanity to evolve. They had fought for their very survival, yes. But that wasn't the full story. Humanity wasn't just built on war. It was built on the ability to rise after every fall. Chancellor, Finn said, his voice unwavering, humanity's survival is not a weakness. It's our strength. We've fought and endured, yes. But we've also built. We've built civilizations, alliances, and peace in the aftermath of war. Peace, Pithra echoed, the word dripping from his tongue like venom. What peace has humanity truly achieved? After every war, there's only another conflict. You, Major Donovan, represent a species that cannot move beyond its history. Finn leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You think humanity can't change? That we're defined by our past? You're wrong. There was a flicker of something, perhaps surprise, behind Pithra's compound eyes. But he quickly masked it, slipping back into his neutral demeanor. You misunderstand me, Major. I am not questioning humanity's ability to adapt. I question whether humanity has evolved enough to be trusted with a place among the stars. The room grew quieter. It wasn't just Pithra anymore. The others, the alien delegates, were listening now, their eyes locked on Finn. For the first time since he'd boarded the Dominion, he felt something akin to a challenge, not from Pithra, but from the room as a whole. He wasn't just defending humanity anymore. He was fighting for their right to exist as more than just survivors. You talk about evolution, Chancellor, Finn said, his voice steady. But what about you? Your species evolved because you were able to adapt. Humanity has done the same. We've evolved through our struggles. And we're not done yet. We fight because we are constantly adapting, learning from our past. It's not about war, it's about the will to never stop. That's what makes us different. Pithra regarded him for a long moment, his many eyes studying Finn with the precision of an algorithm. Finally, he spoke. I still have my doubts, Major. The galaxy is not ready for your people. Not yet. Finn stood, his face set in a hard line. Then you'll keep doubting us. But we'll keep proving you wrong. Because that's what humanity does, we prove the doubters wrong. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving the murmurs of the alien delegates behind him. As he stepped into the corridor, he felt a brief flicker of something, a deep-seated ache from years of conflict. His past was never far behind him. But he was more than just the soldier. He was the voice of humanity's future, and he wouldn't let them be defined by the darkness of their past. The ship's hum was a constant companion, a reminder that this journey wasn't just about diplomacy. It was about survival, evolution, and proving that humanity's place in the galaxy was earned, not given. And as Finn moved forward, he knew the journey ahead would only grow more difficult. But he was ready. He had to be. For humanity. For himself. And for the future that lay beyond the stars. The sun was setting beyond the vast expanse of stars outside the Dominion, casting long shadows across the corridors. Finn stood in front of the ship's central control hub, his eyes scanning the rows of blinking consoles and soft blue holographic readouts. His mind was still buzzing from the meeting with Chancellor Pithra. The room had been heavy with hostility, but Finn knew something had shifted. There was no turning back now. He had given them a glimpse of humanity's true strength, resilience in the face of fear and doubt. But as the quiet hum of the ship filled his ears, a sudden ripple of unease passed through him. He wasn't sure why, but his instincts told him that things were about to take a dangerous turn. The Dominion was more than just a diplomatic vessel. It was a microcosm of the galaxy's tensions, and the pressure of those tensions was beginning to build to a breaking point. "Major Donovan," a voice said from behind, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Virex, the Zarna envoy. "The Chancellor wishes to speak with you again. Immediately." Finn's eyes flicked toward the alien. Virex had been one of the few delegates to show him anything resembling respect, though it was often thinly veiled in politeness. Still, his warnings had always been sharp, reminders of how much humanity had yet to prove. "I'll be there," Finn said curtly, pushing away the unease that still tugged at him. Virex gave a brief nod, but as he turned to leave, Finn's communicator buzzed with an incoming message. It was a quick series of encrypted commands, the kind only sent by high-ranking officers or those with clearance. It was a warning. An alert. The signal was from the ship's internal security network. "Unauthorized access detected in the cargo hold," the message read. "All security personnel advised to investigate." Finn's hand hovered over the console, his brow furrowing. Unauthorized access? The cargo hold was off-limits to most personnel, and security protocols were strict. It was a rare event for the ship's security to be compromised, especially this early into the diplomatic journey. Without hesitation, he tapped the communicator. "Security report in," Finn said, his voice steady but urgent. There was a brief pause before a strained voice crackled through the comms. "Major Donovan, there's an alert from Section C in the cargo hold. We believe we've detected sabotage. Someone's tampered with one of the ship's core systems, power relays, maybe. We're investigating now." "Good," Finn said, his eyes narrowing. "I'll meet you there." He didn't waste another second, turning quickly and heading toward the elevator shaft. His mind was already racing, running through the possible scenarios. Sabotage was a tactic many species had employed before. Distrust and fear bred these kinds of desperate actions. But who was behind it? And why now, of all times? The elevator doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Finn stepped inside, his gaze hardening as the lift descended into the depths of the ship. The air grew cooler as he moved deeper into the Dominion, and the low hum of machinery echoed off the metal walls. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the galaxy's expectations was pressing down on him. The doors to the cargo hold opened with a quiet whoosh, and Finn stepped into the dimly lit room. Several security officers were already on the scene, their hands hovering over consoles, scanning the area for signs of tampering. "Major," one of the officers, a human with a tense expression, greeted him. "We found something strange. Looks like someone bypassed the security locks and accessed the power conduits. We've got a potential breach in the lower circuits." Finn's gaze shifted to the large, open hatch at the far end of the room. It led into the bowels of the ship, where the core systems were maintained. The soft glow of emergency lights flickered from within. He could feel the pulse of danger growing stronger. "Who has access to these areas?" Finn asked, his voice calm yet commanding. "Only senior engineers and the highest-ranking crew members," the officer replied. "There's no reason anyone should be down there. But we've detected a signature, something's been tampered with. Looks like an override code was used." Finn's mind clicked into gear. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't random sabotage. It was targeted. "We need to find out who's responsible," Finn said, his tone hardening. "And fast." The officers scattered, their search routines kicking into high gear. Finn stood at the entrance, his eyes scanning the room, waiting for the next piece to fall into place. It wasn't long before another officer approached him, her expression grim. Sir, you need to see this, she said, motioning for him to follow. Finn followed her deeper into the cargo hold, where the damage had been done. The exposed power conduit system was riddled with cuts, sharp, precise slashes that indicated someone knew exactly where to strike. But what caught Finn's attention was a small, metallic object wedged in the wires. He bent down, carefully extracting the object from the tangled mess. It was a communicator, small and sleek, not unlike the ones used by the diplomatic teams. But this one was damaged. Scratched. Torn. It didn't belong here. Finn's mind raced. This wasn't just sabotage, it was a message. Get this to the lab, he instructed, handing the communicator to the officer. I want a full analysis. Find out who this belongs to. The officer nodded and hurried off. Finn was left alone with his thoughts. As the minutes ticked by, he found himself drawn back to the idea of the whispers, the constant rumors about the Deathworlder on board. It was becoming clear to him now, there were those who would stop at nothing to derail these peace talks. Someone wanted chaos. And Finn had become the perfect target for their schemes. He turned sharply, his hand resting on the side of the console. I need to speak with the Chancellor, he muttered, his voice low and filled with a quiet determination. Whoever was behind this would soon learn that humanity was not so easily intimidated. Finn arrived at the Chancellor's chamber moments later, finding Pithra already in discussion with several other diplomats. The alien leader turned, his expression unreadable. Major Donovan, Pithra said, his tone smooth but pointed. What is it this time? There's been sabotage, Finn said quickly. Someone's tampered with the ship's power conduits. We're investigating, but I wanted you to be informed. Pithra's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Sabotage? How typical. It seems some will stop at nothing to ensure this peace does not come to fruition. Finn didn't miss the hint of satisfaction in Pithra's voice. I'll keep you updated, he said, his gaze unwavering. As he turned to leave, Finn felt the cold sting of truth hit him. This wasn't just sabotage. This was a calculated move, a test to see how far humanity could be pushed before it broke. And he, the Deathworlder, was right in the center of it. It was clear now. The galaxy wasn't ready for peace. And he would have to fight, not just for humanity, but for the survival of the future they hoped to build. The news of the sabotage had spread like wildfire through the Dominion. Tension hung thick in the air, and as Finn made his way down the gleaming, sterile halls, he felt it settle into his chest, heavier with each step. The ship was no longer just a venue for peace talks, it had become a battleground of its own, with every alien species on board eyeing humanity with distrust. And now, an act of sabotage, an attack aimed directly at the heart of their mission, had escalated the stakes. Finn's mind raced. He had seen enough sabotage in his military career to recognize the signs. This wasn't an isolated incident. The tampering with the power conduits, the broken communicator, all of it was designed to provoke chaos. But who was behind it? And why now, of all times? Humanity's role in the peace talks, fragile as it was, had just become more precarious. As he approached the meeting room where Chancellor Pithra awaited him, the thought of facing the alien leader filled him with a quiet resolve. The peace talks could go either way now. His presence, his reputation as a Deathworlder, had already been a point of contention. And the sabotage? That would only solidify the suspicion that humanity was not fit to be part of the galaxy's diplomatic future. He entered the room without ceremony. The chamber was dimly lit, bathed in soft blue light that shimmered off the high-tech consoles and the polished table in the center. Pithra stood at the far end of the room, surrounded by other diplomats who gave Finn brief, measured glances as he entered. Their faces were unreadable, but Finn could sense the underlying tension. The Chancellor spoke first, his voice calm but edged with impatience. Major Donovan, I assume you are here to explain why my ship was attacked? Why the peace talks are now compromised because of the actions of one of your kind? Finn didn't flinch at Pithra's words. He had expected them. The Zarna leader had long been skeptical of humanity's place in the galaxy, But now, with the sabotage, the cracks in that skepticism were beginning to show. "I don't know who did it, Chancellor. But we are investigating, and I will find out." "Finding out is not the issue, Major," Pithra replied, his tone turning colder. "The issue is trust. And with this latest disruption, I am afraid you have shattered what little trust remained." A heavy silence filled the room. Finn could feel the weight of the gazes on him, sharp, judgmental. He didn't need to be told. He knew the truth. Humanity's presence here had always been a fragile thing. The idea that they, as a species, could be trusted with the fate of the galaxy had been met with skepticism from the start. This sabotage was the spark that could ignite the fire. "I understand the stakes, Chancellor," Finn said, his voice steady. "But this isn't about us as individuals. It's about the peace we're all trying to build here. If we let this sabotage tear us apart, we've already lost." Pithra narrowed his eyes, his many antennae twitching slightly. "You speak of peace, Major, but you have yet to prove that your species can contribute to it. Your very existence is a contradiction to the concept of peace." Finn stood tall, his fists clenched at his sides. "I'm not here to justify humanity's past. We've fought wars, yes. But we're not defined by them. We're here because we want to build a future. Together. And if you can't see that, then this mission is already doomed." The room was still. The other delegates shifted slightly, their eyes darting between Finn and Pithra. There was a palpable tension in the air now, like a storm ready to break. And then, as if summoned by the growing hostility, a new voice cut through the silence. "I agree with the Major," came a deep, rumbling voice from the back of the room. Finn turned to see it was the Kali delegate, one of the more conservative members of the council. "The actions of a few should not define the potential of an entire species." Finn's eyes locked onto the Kali delegate, surprised by the sudden support. The Kali were a deeply honorable species, but they had always been wary of humanity's approach. Still, this was a start. He nodded in acknowledgement, trying to gauge the shifting dynamics in the room. "I don't believe that sabotage was an act of humanity's doing," continued the Kali delegate. "But I do believe that the Major and his people must show that they are capable of more than just survival. They must prove they can lead, as equals, not as rebels from a dying world." Pithra's gaze shifted between the two, his displeasure evident. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of the room. "The situation has already escalated too far. We cannot afford to let this turn into a galactic incident." "Then let's fix it before it gets worse," Finn shot back. "The sabotage has to be dealt with. We'll find who's behind it, and we'll make sure they're held accountable." Pithra's eyes darkened as he turned to face Finn directly. "And if the sabotage is indeed linked to your species? What then? How will you prove that humanity is not a threat?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Finn felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. If the sabotage did turn out to be a coordinated attack from someone within humanity's own ranks, or worse, if it was used to frame humanity, then the consequences would be catastrophic. "I will prove it by showing you that we can handle our own problems," Finn said, his voice cold but resolute. "You want to see humanity's strength? You'll see it. We don't run from our issues. We face them head-on." Pithra studied him for a moment longer, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Very well, Major. We will let your actions speak for themselves. But remember this, one mistake, one misstep, and you may very well be the reason this peace fails." Finn stood firm, unyielding. "Then it's a risk I'll take." The room fell silent again as the weight of Pithra's words settled over everyone present. The next few days would be critical. If Finn couldn't uncover who was behind the sabotage and prove humanity's worth, the peace talks would collapse, and the galaxy would be plunged into chaos. As the delegates began to leave the room, Finn stayed behind, his mind already turning over the possibilities. This was no longer just about diplomatic talks, it was about survival. But humanity had never backed down from a challenge, and Finn wasn't about to let Pithra or anyone else dictate their future. He would find the saboteur. He would restore humanity's honor. And, no matter what, he would show the galaxy that they had earned their place among the stars. The atmosphere aboard the Dominion had shifted. What began as a routine diplomatic voyage now felt like a high-stakes game, with humanity's future hanging in the balance. Finn stood in front of the secure communications console, his fingers hovering over the controls. The sabotage had rocked the peace talks to their core, and the clock was ticking. Chancellor Pithra had made it clear, one misstep and humanity's place among the stars would be erased before it even began. But Finn had no intention of letting that happen. "Major Donovan," came the voice of Virex, the Zarna Envoy. He was a creature of many colors, his body a shimmering array of intricate hues, but his tone was deadly serious. "The Chancellor requests your presence again. The Council is about to convene, and they are eager to hear your findings." Finn took a steadying breath. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he had one advantage: his gut. He trusted his instincts more than any piece of evidence. The sabotage wasn't random. It was too clean, too specific. Someone aboard had been planning this for a while, but who? "I'm on my way," Finn replied, his voice steady. He walked briskly through the corridors of the Dominion, his mind running through the possibilities. The sabotage was a calculated move, and the fact that it happened so early into the mission was no accident. Someone didn't just want to undermine humanity, they wanted to break the peace talks entirely. But why? And who stood to gain from it? As he entered the grand meeting hall, he was greeted by the cold, calculating stares of the alien delegates. The room was a marvel of alien design, sleek and futuristic, but its beauty only made the tension feel more oppressive. At the center of the table sat Pithra, his alien eyes narrowed, waiting. The other delegates, from the Kali to the Saltrians, took their seats with equal amounts of skepticism and wariness. "Major Donovan," Pithra began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I trust you have made progress in understanding the sabotage that has soiled this diplomatic mission?" Finn stood at the far side of the room, his eyes scanning the faces of the alien delegates. They were waiting for an answer. Waiting for him to show that humanity could be trusted, or that they were just a violent species unworthy of a place in the galaxy. He wasn't going to give them the answer they wanted, he was going to give them the truth. "I've found something," Finn said, his voice unwavering. "It wasn't random. Someone on board has been working to undermine these peace talks. And I know exactly who it is." A murmur passed through the room, a ripple of disbelief. The tension rose as Finn's words settled in. This wasn't just a small security breach, it was a deliberate attack, and he was ready to expose the person behind it. Pithra's antennae twitched, his voice icy. "And who, pray tell, is this saboteur?" Finn met Pithra's gaze, his expression hardening. "It was one of your own, Chancellor. One of the highest-ranking members of your delegation. A Tali diplomat, who's been working with the Zarna to derail the peace talks from the very beginning." The room fell silent, save for the low hum of the ship's engines. The Kali delegate in question, a tall and imposing figure named Drekor, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze flicking between Finn and Pithra. "You're accusing me of sabotage?" Drekor's voice was cold, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "I'm not accusing you," Finn said, his voice sharp. "I'm presenting the facts. We found traces of your encryption codes on the broken communicator. You were the one who used the override to access the power conduits." The room erupted into whispers, the sound of alien languages filling the air. Drekor's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. Pithra held up a hand, silencing the room. "Is this true, Drekor?" His voice was deceptively calm, though the tension in his eyes betrayed his inner thoughts. Drekor remained silent for a moment, his shoulders stiffening. I deny these accusations," he said, though his voice wavered ever so slightly. "Then explain the communicator," Finn pressed. "Explain how your encryption code was the one that accessed the power systems." The Kali diplomat's face hardened, and for a moment, Finn saw something flicker in his eyes, a recognition that he had been caught. But before Drekor could speak, Pithra stood, his commanding presence filling the room. "Enough," Pithra said, his voice ringing with finality. Drekor, if this is true, then your actions are nothing short of treason against the very peace we have worked so hard to achieve. Drekor didn't respond. Instead, he looked at Pithra with something akin to resignation in his eyes. The room fell silent again, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. Finn watched as the Kali delegate stood slowly, his movements deliberate. I didn't want to do this, Drekor said, his voice barely a whisper. But your people, humanity, are a threat. You're too unpredictable. Too dangerous. Finn's jaw tightened. He had known it all along. The fear of humanity, of what they represented, had been at the heart of this sabotage. Drekor and his co-conspirators in the Zarna delegation feared that humanity's rise in the galaxy would disrupt the balance of power. They saw peace as a fragile thing, and humanity, with its history of conflict, was seen as the destabilizing force. Pithra's eyes burned with fury. So this was about power? About fear? You would risk the peace of the entire galaxy because of your own insecurities? Drekor didn't reply, his shoulders slumping as he looked down at the floor. The room was still as the weight of his betrayal hung in the air. Finn stood, his heart pounding in his chest. This is why humanity can be trusted, Chancellor. Not because we're perfect, not because we don't have our flaws, but because we fight to protect the future we've built. And when we make mistakes, we own up to them. We don't hide behind politics or fear. We face the truth head-on. Pithra's eyes lingered on Finn for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Perhaps, he said softly, I was wrong. Maybe humanity does have a place among us after all. You've shown us that your people can endure. But it's more than that. You've shown us that your species can rise above your past. The room fell quiet once again. Finn's chest tightened as the weight of the moment settled over him. He had done it. Humanity had proven its worth. But as he stood there, he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The galaxy had its doubts about humanity, but Finn had shown them that humanity wasn't just about survival. It was about building something more. And that was something no one could take away. Pithra turned to the rest of the room. We will proceed with the peace talks, he announced. But know this, humanity has earned our respect today. It is time we see them not as a threat, but as an ally. The delegates exchanged looks, some hesitant, others hopeful. For the first time since the mission began, the weight of the tension lifted, if only slightly. And Finn knew that, for better or worse, humanity had taken its first true step toward a future in the galaxy.